Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Hour 2 of today's show, Thursday, October 7th. I'm Jason Williams, Bill Walter here in the studio as well, and we have another special guest. Thanks again to Charlie Schill for joining us in Hour 1, talking arts and entertainment in Cache Valley every Thursday here on the show. Here in Hour 2, we are joined by none other than the CEO of Visionary Homes, Jeff Jackson. And Jeff, appreciate taking some time to join us today. To put yourself in the spotlight, in the hot seat, if you will. But what we're talking about today for listeners who don't live in Providence is an issue in Providence that's popped up around a proposition. A decision was made by the Providence city long ago. Well, not years ago or anything like that, but quite a while ago. And this decision was a particular type of zoning for a parcel of land, about 22 acres, that had been previously annexed by the city from Cache County. And this decision by the city was to zone this land for what is known in Providence City as life cycle residential. It's a type of zoning that allows for different types of housing. And it is a type of zoning that came to be in Providence City, as many other cities are going to have to follow suit on this, after a legislative mandate. The state, about 4 years ago, said to cities throughout the state, get it together on housing. You've got 5 years to come up with a plan and get back to us on that. Providence was ahead of the game on this. But as with many things housing related, there's been some controversy, some pushback. And Proposition 1, which will be on the ballot for Providence residents this November, is a proposition that basically says we like what the city did. We support the city's decision. That's why we elect these representatives in the first place. The opposition to Proposition 1 is saying the opposite. No, we want to undo all of this, go back to the drawing board when it comes to housing in general. They'd like to see only single-family dwellings used at this particular piece of land, whereas Life Cycle would offer an option for different types, high density and others. So that's basically where we're at. And so we reached out to our friends at Visionary Homes and said, hey, you guys are there right in the trenches on all this. Would you come and talk to us about it and explain, what life cycle means, what this development is envisioned as? And Jeff, I don't know if you volunteered or if they said, you got to go do this and twisted your arm, but thank you either way for being here. And where would you like to start on all of this? How did you guys get involved?
Thanks, Jason, for having us on. Obviously, as our company's grown over the years, we've become part of the development community, not only the building community, but the developing community. And one of the things that we're passionate about at Visionary Homes is providing housing for all walks of life, from the first home buyer all the way up to the estate home. And as over the last 3 or 4 years, as we all know, housing has been a very, very hot topic at the state level and the local level.
Sure.
And so we've had to come up with creative ways, as prices move and as costs move, we've had to come up with creative ways to hit all of those different demographics. A lot of the rhetoric that is out there is that we help draft the life cycle zone, which is completely false. As we monitor different cities around the county, we look to see which ones are actively involved in housing. And Providence, like you mentioned, was ahead of the game on this mandate from the state. And so as we were working this piece of property, following what Providence City was doing, we were very excited to see an opportunity to hit all of these different demographics.
This is, it's been referred to by, I've heard state lawmakers call it growing pains. I've heard a lot of this comes down to the fact that things are changing. And I'll be honest, I don't live in Providence, but where I live, I've watched a lot of the fields where I used to stir up dust on my dirt bike as a kid become subdivisions. Nobody likes to see that. People have to live somewhere, right? I mean, that should be the foundation of this conversation, right? That unless we want to start saying to 18-year-olds when they turn 18, thanks for growing up here, bye, we've got to wrap our heads around this, right? And you guys are trying to help people do that?
Yeah, that's what we spend a lot of our time doing, is how are we going to provide for our own kids?
Because this isn't people moving in that's going to double our population.
No, there's
For
a
the
lot.
most part.
Yeah, there's a lot of that sediment, but 60% of our growth is still internal. I grew up here in the valley just as you did, and I've got 4 kids that I would like to see stay here, and I know that's the same for many people.
Sure.
And so yeah, we're creating our own growth, and we need to figure out solutions to provide housing for them.
And that's, kind of what leads us to where we are right now and having to accept different types of housing. And is it fair to say that the opposition to this plan, to life cycle residential in general, but also this specific parcel of land, is the density that is planned?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they have 2 or 3 talking points. Density is definitely one of them. Housing types is another. And then, traffic always, every time that we deal with these types of project, traffic becomes a talking point. But those are always the 3 main talking points when we get into these denser populated neighborhoods.
And how do you, so when you're talking with a group of residents at say a public hearing or something like that, how do you quell those concerns?
Well, when you talk about traffic specifically, and potentially in this project, the cities do a very good job around here of being forward thinking, and they all have collector streets that are designed to move traffic.
Sure.
One of the bottlenecks that's been in Providence for a number of years is a couple of bridges across Spring Creek Parkway. And so even though Spring Creek Parkway runs right past our project, there were a couple of bridges that had to be completed to make that collector street functional. And so for a lot of years, traffic would have to go around the project, around those bridges. But part of our project was to finish one of those bridges that now has allowed traffic to move down off the hill a lot more efficiently.
I'm a fan, by the way. I'll reveal my bias on that one.
So
I have to travel that route occasionally for work, and it made a difference.
We're not going to prevent traffic, and that's, with growth comes traffic, and we recognize that. But what we can do is to help implement the plans that have been laid out ahead of time in the traffic. On the density discussion, this one's a really interesting because of changing demographics.
Sure.
There is a lot of people that don't want the traditional quarter, third acre lot, half acre lot. They like the notion that they can lock their home, leave for a vacation, and when they come back, things are taken care of them. There's also a large demographic that has accepted, because of costs, that I'm not going to have the big backyard, but I'm okay if the community provides open space, walking trails, other recreational type amenities. Sure. That I can still get that same feel as being in my backyard.
And we should point out that this change, this shift in preferences, which is maybe generational, maybe just demographics. I mean, it's maybe all of those things together. It's not just Providence, right? This is we see this. Hiram City looking at more dense housing. Logan City obviously is just up the street here, in fact, from the station. This is a reality that's upon every city. And we have a shortage statewide.
Well, if you just look at Providence, and you're right, this is definitely countywide, statewide, citywide. Right now there's 2 active homes on the market in Providence that are not part of projects that Visionary Homes is doing.
Wow.
2.
That's amazing.
And so for them for us to not be nervous and not be willing to address or talk about these topics and figure out how we're going to solve this, that's pretty irresponsible of us as we talk about our children and our grandchildren.
You're invested in this as well, right? Not just as individuals, but as the companies, Visionary Homes. The future of housing is also the future of the company. So you're navigating this with the rest of us. How without, obviously getting into any company secrets or anything like that, how do internal discussions go when it comes to, planning these things out or talking about, okay, we're planning this level of density here. The city's on board. It's been zoned. It's perfect, everything. We're going to get some community pushback. You guys then, I know, go out and try and hold your own public hearings.
Yeah, in different situations we do. There are times when we'll go into a neighborhood that we know that the pushback is going to be such that those meetings aren't going to net us any benefit.
Sure.
And at those times we're working with city council and with staff to try to catch their vision. One of the great things about living in America is that we have elections every couple of years, and we elect people that we feel are going to represent our views. And so we believe that as citizens elect city council members and as they elect mayors, that they've done their vetting, and that we should allow our elected officials to do their job. We might not always agree with their choices, but hopefully we elected people that we can align with.
Especially relevant when you're talking about something that needs to be planned for 5, 10, 15 years, like zoning.
Yeah. As far as internally, it's interesting when you start diving into some of the comments that are out there that we get accused of profiteering and different things and racking all this money up. Truth be known, on this particular project, if we would have decided to do it with just big, huge estate lots or 1 acre lots or 3/4 acre lots, the headache that we would have gone through, and even the profit that we potentially could have made as a company, would have been equal to or greater than the profits that we're looking at with this mixed use product.
That makes sense because that's the current market, right? That's where the money is.
Right. That's where you can drive the profits. That's not our goal at Visionary Home. Our goal at Visionary Homes is to build sustainable communities. Personally, if you follow a lot of the planning around the country, around the state, one of the things that's been well documented is that as we start to segregate populations, that communities live and die, and they go through cycles. When you start mixing different segregations, they're a vibrant community. People interact with different. You interact with different people, and we have a better community when we have some newlyweds or first-time home buyers that interact with maybe some empty nesters or a family that has 2 or 3 children. We have better interaction, and I personally believe in the life cycle zone for that reason alone.
It's fascinating. A quick note on that for listeners: if you'd like to read more about what life cycle zoning means in Providence City, it's on the city webpage, and it's kind of not only a fascinating description of what Providence has planned for their future when it comes to housing, but what is likely something every city is going to have to wrap their heads around in the future. And again, it's a legislative mandate at this point that they need to within the next few years. Our guest again here in studio, CEO of Visionary Homes, Jeff Jackson. We're talking about Proposition 1, a zoning debate happening in Providence. A ballot initiative will be on the ballot this November for Providence residents to either say, basically, I like Proposition 1 because I support what the city council, the people we elected, decided to do. The opposition saying, nope, blow the whole thing up, and we'll go back to the drawing board on this, and the plan for about 22 acres previously annexed from the county by the city. We'll talk more about this with our guest, Jeff Jackson of Visionary Homes, right after this. Welcome back to KVN News for the People. We're joined in studio by the CEO of Visionary Homes, Jeff Jackson. We're talking about an issue that is specific to Providence, but man, it has, the potential ramifications throughout the valley, throughout the state, because we are in the midst of a housing crunch. We have a projected doubling of our population in the next 30 years here in Cache Valley. The majority of that growth coming from people who are born here who want to stay, children of families, basically. And right now, there are not enough places for people to live in general. So it's a debate that goes far beyond Providence City, but specifically right now, this debate is coming up around what's known as Proposition 1 in Providence City. The short story on this, again, the city council made a decision, planning and zoning involved in this, the mayor involved in this, all part of the life cycle zoning developed by the city a couple of years ago as part of a legislative mandate for cities in Utah to have a plan for housing going forward. That plan in Providence City was life cycle zoning, and they made a decision with some land, about 22 acres, and that decision has brought some opposition out of the woodwork. So Proposition 1 is saying, no, we support the decision made by our elected officials to move ahead with this plan. The opposition is saying, no, blow the whole thing up. We'll start over with this 22 acres. I'll say it and not ask our guests to weigh in here out of fairness, but to me, the entire thing sort of reeks of that traditional NIMBYism, they call it, not in my backyard. People saying, yes, I agree we need high-density housing, otherwise we got to start kicking 18-year-olds out, like that old Stephen King Children of the Corn movie in reverse. And that is really what the argument is in my mind. I'm, of course, biased in that way, but won't ask you guys to weigh in on that or throw out an accusation like that, but I know we hear a lot here at the station through our news team, tips that are sent in anonymously to us here at the show. And I know there are a lot of inaccuracies out there about Proposition 1, about life cycle zoning itself, what it means, and of course what more dense housing means as far as how it changes a community. A lot of bad information. So we wanted to invite you guys in here because you guys, this is what you do, you know, and you know, and you're here in the Valley too, so you build something, and then you don't just disappear to California and hope everything goes well. You get to live here as residents of the Valley and see it play out. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a lifelong resident of Cache Valley, and my intention is to be here through the remainder of my life. And, we're looking to build sustainable communities that can last a lifetime. Some of the disheartening things about this Prop 1 is that, I understand the referendum process.
Sure.
But I feel like that the information needs to be honest and fair that's given to the people, and then they need to be able to make a fair, honest decision. When the truths are distorted or twisted, and that's the propaganda that is distributed, it makes it really disheartening that we're all one community and trying to create what's best for our children and grandchildren. With this particular project, initially, it was a larger project. Initially, it was 40 acres.
Oh, wow.
And the proponents petitioned that they were putting the entire property under referendum. And as we started building the southern half and what we call Phase 1, we had a lot of the people that had signed the referendum question how in the world we were able to move forward. The Phase 1 was never under referendum, and it was always part of it, we always had the proper zoning to get started. And so my request or plea is for people that are voting on this to really study the issue, make sure you have the real facts, come and visit the site, walk the walking trails, fill the open space, and judge for yourself if we've made a mistake here or if this is a bad community. I think that people will be pleasantly surprised at how open it feels, the open space that's available, and the style of the homes are a very nice home.
This is so what happens if this is all blown up? If Proposition 1 fails, if the decision of the Planning and Zoning City Council is undone basically by this ballot, what then?
Obviously, we're a for-profit business. We own the land, and we're going to look at all of our options. We're going to continue to work with the state on this affordable housing issue. We'll continue to work with the city and looking at another annexation. We will have to annex it back into the city, and then we'll have to work with their zoning laws and the different options that are available to us. I own the land. We have to do something with the land, and we're going to figure that out after November 2nd.
It seems to me that if this type, I'm looking down the road in every other city, if this type of thing becomes a norm, opposition to this type of thing, we're talking about just more sprawling subdivisions, right?
Yeah,
that's the most likely thing that will happen with land like this.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm amazed at all the time is there's two fights that happen, and we talk about urban sprawl, and we talk about that we want to keep Cache Valley this rural feel, but the only way that we can keep Cache Valley rural feel is to go dense where we're building homes. Yeah. If we're mandated that we have to stay quarter acre, half acre, we are going to chew up farmland and agriculture land in Cache Valley extremely fast to where that rural feel that we all love and hope for is going to dissipate much quicker than if we build dense housing.
That's we become Syracuse. There are spots along the Wasatch Front literally where this type of planning just wasn't on anyone's mind yet. And so they just built and built and built, and people needed houses, and it was all great. And now suddenly they're in a situation where they have no thoroughfares, no roads at all that aren't 25 miles an hour because everything goes through residential or a school zone. They can't attract businesses in. And this is all, no one's fault, no nefarious intent here. It wasn't on their mind. I like that cities like Providence are thinking about this long-term future and saying, we need a business district. We need routes that are just through, streets that go through. It's not a 25-mile-an-hour zone. It's maybe 45. And I do have sympathy for those opposed because I think a lot of this is the change seems rapid, and it's human nature, I think, to have a knee-jerk reaction to change, to say, this is going to be built just down the street from me. Nothing like that's been in Providence before. And I'm scared of this. That's part of the sentiment you guys are hearing, right, in opposition?
Oh, for sure. And just like you, we understand that point of view. And it's a real point of view. But like you mentioned earlier, if we can't get over NIMBYism, everybody keeps saying push west, push west. I adamantly disagree in the sense that as we stereotype people as to what they can afford and where they should live, I think we're doing a huge disservice to our communities. These buyers that are buying in Vineyard and other projects that we have that are these higher densities, these are our school teachers. These are our firefighters. These are our policemen. These are our hairdressers. These are not hoodlums that have no desire to contribute to society. These are good, hardworking people that just want a fair chance and a fair place to live and a nice place to live. And I think they deserve that just as much as somebody that can afford the 1 acre parcel on the hill.
That's what Jeff has mentioned. For listeners curious, I'll link to this on our Facebook page. This is reflected in some research that's been done by the state in home buying attitudes and preferences. Jeff mentions it there, but that change, preference change of what types of homes, what types of living, young professionals, people who are in their late 20s, early 30s, maybe just started a family, maybe still single, but they've got money and they're looking to put down roots. How they want to put down roots, though, the state has found is very different than 20 years ago. Again, it all speaks to how complex all this is. Proposition 1, again, will be on the ballot in November, and we're discussing it with someone directly involved in all of this with Providence City, the CEO of Visionary Homes, Jeff Jackson, our guest, and we'll be back with more of For the People right after this Look at the News with KVNU's Bill Walter. I'm sorry. Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. I'm Jason Williams and Bill Walter here in the studio as well. You're listening to a full hour with our guests here in studio from Visionary Homes, the CEO of Visionary Homes, located here in Cache Valley, Jeff Jackson. And we're talking about, really, we're having a broad conversation here, to be truthful, about housing in general, about changing demographics, about growing population, about all the things we're going to have to wrap our heads around, whether we like it or not. As I've said, I'm still, my own version of NIMBYism is these places I used to ride my dirt bike as a kid that are now, subdivisions. I wish that weren't the case. I miss some of the open space in that way. At the same time, I would be sad if family members that I would have had to have told their kids at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, whenever they finish college, you can't live here. You got to go elsewhere. And that's where most of our growth that's projected over the next 34 years is coming from. People born here and wanting to stay here. And everyone would like that option, I think, if we could pull the valley. But the reality is to have that option, we're going to have to wrap our heads around different things we're maybe not used to, changes in how we build housing. We're going to have to learn to love density as opposed to, sprawling 3-acre yards and things like that. And as Jeff has mentioned, we also have changing demographics and preferences. People that have enough money to have, that 3 acre, 4 acres and a nice house, and they don't want it. They want a townhouse or even an apartment, and to instead have access to open space around them for an evening walk. And that's something that the state is seeing too in the research they're doing on housing and more. It's complex. That's what I'm trying to say. In Providence right now on the ballot, there is something called Proposition 1. And support for Proposition 1 is basically saying the city council made this decision, as they're elected to do. Planning and zoning a part of this as well. Life cycle zoning is a long-term plan for the city that this current development project meets. And Proposition 1 says that's the way this is supposed to work. It should move forward. Opposition to Proposition 1 says blow the whole thing up, start over. And it is coming from opposition to, some of the housing density, the location. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but as I understand it, the opposition to Proposition 1 has basically come out and said, if this 22 acres is developed at all, it should be a subdivision. It should be single-family dwelling with large yards. Is that a fair characterization of what they're arguing for, basically?
Yeah, they're, in a lot of their literature and different things that we've read, they are definitely pushing for a single-family development, and with no additional density. As we talked, if you look at our proposed plan versus a single-family density, we're talking the difference of about 100 units or 100 homes. If you throw that on a typical quarter or third acre lot, like we were talking earlier, there's another 25 acres of space or of ground that we need to find somewhere to house that same number of people.
Wow.
And so,
in perspective.
Back to that discussion of sprawl, it's a real issue. The other topic that I think is important to talk about as we look at this is, we attend a lot of Envision Cache Valley type seminars, and one of the things that the county has been pushing over the last 4 or 5 years is the cost of urban sprawl. And they really talk about how much roads cost and how much maintenance and how much the utility work costs when you talk urban sprawl. And one of the former planners for Cache Valley did a great job of laying that out and putting it down on a cost per mile or a cost per lineal foot. And when you start looking at those numbers, all of that tax money and that tax burden falls on us as citizens, and it's not just a few dollars. It was astronomical. That if we can build denser and tighter, that we all save property tax, we all save tax money. It allows the city to figure out how they're going to deal with their aging infrastructure, and so there's multiple issues that go into this density discussion.
You mentioned traffic too, and I'm trying to remember where I saw this. But it was research on traffic and housing density too. And nothing contributes to traffic more than spread, than space between homes, because everyone is coming through. Yeah, but it's fascinating to see, and that's not to say there won't always be a huge market for that. There will always be people, maybe even a majority, that want those, maybe a 2-3 acre yard and a single family home. But that really is, I guess what I'm trying to ask is from your experience with Visionary Homes, this to me seems like it's been a pretty rapid change. The preferences in home buyers, people wanting to live in smaller dwellings or even apartments, but in exchange for giving up that yard, they want to be able to go walk a park in the evenings without traveling miles to do so. Has that been difficult, as a developer, has that been difficult to adapt to? Because it seems like a rapid change. Millennials, they ruined everything.
They've ruined everything. I think that the millennials, to be fair to them, there are still those that want that single-family home, sure, but they don't want the big yard that goes with it. And the other thing that's exaggerated or accelerated this change that you're describing is just this concept of attainability and affordability. It's a real issue when you start comparing what people make here in the Valley, sure, versus what they can afford. And I think that to maintain our quality of life, for our children and grandchildren, we need to work very hard to provide attainable and affordable housing. We all know that if we're strapped with a lot of debt to just make ends meet and live, that's not a quality of life that we grow up with, and it makes people ornery, makes people cranky, makes them less neighbor-like, and so we need to have different options that allow them to afford to be in a home that they can afford based on their income level.
Sure.
And so I think the discussion, I think when you talk about it being accelerated, it's because there's pressures from lots of different angles that have helped to accelerate that. As far as how we've handled it as a builder, it goes back to the field of dreams. We are going to listen to what people want. That's one of the things that amazes.
You're not going to build something that won't sell.
Right. I mean, the opposition sits
you're
there.
in trouble, right?
Yeah,
if you do that.
That says we're creating a market. We can't create markets. People create the markets, and it's our job to listen to that and adapt our product offering. And that's no different than any business. If you don't adapt to your customers what they're willing to buy, and you're not going to be around very long.
Sure. That's, it seems to me when people envision this stuff, when they talk about, dense housing, everyone always jumps to an example of this. And we've all seen one, unfortunately, like this, a duplex or even an apartment building with the screens hanging off the windows and the stucco's fallen apart years ago. And it's not only in need of a paint, but maybe a new roof for the yard. The landlord's completely given up on the yard, although with drought conditions, we might all be doing that. That's what people think of. What are you guys building? It's different than that, right?
I'm just running a quick calculation because you sparked something in my mind.
Uh-oh.
When you talk about density, and this is another interesting discussion, if you go across and look at different densities, if you go into Providence and just look at their densities, they have multifamily zones. They have a multifamily medium, multifamily high. Their multifamily median allows 12 units to their acre. Their multifamily high allows 18 units to the acre. This vineyard project that we're building out is somewhere around 8 units to the acre.
Oh, wow.
So when we talk about density, we're not talking these. I mean, you get into some of the Logan zones, and they'll allow 40, 50, 60 units to the acre.
Yeah. And
so it's pretty interesting that we're talking about density and high density, and we're talking about a project that's 8 units to the acre versus, in Providence, you got 12 units, 18 units to the acre projects. That we're talking about 8 units to the acre. It's just because we've chosen to lay them out different, and we've chosen to add open space and walking trails that they're getting upset about. But when you talk about true density, we're not high density. We're not even medium density in Vineyard.
That's interesting. This is again a discussion all around something called Proposition 1. For Providence residents, it will be on your ballot. You've probably seen signs around. I've seen quite a few of these green signs supporting Proposition 1. And support is basically saying the city council's made this decision, the planning and zoning before them, and it all meets the life cycle standard expectation the city has decided as part of its housing plan long term. The project should move ahead. Opposition to Prop 1 is a group of people in Providence saying, basically, no, blow this whole thing up and start from scratch. We'd like to see just a subdivision if this property is developed at all. We're talking with Jeff Jackson, CEO of Visionary Homes, and we'll be back right after this. Wrapping up the show today, I just want to give a quick shout out to our guests. Not an easy thing to put yourself in the spotlight, especially in a controversial issue, especially in Providence, of all places. But Jeff Jackson, CEO of Visionary Homes, appreciate taking a full hour of your day to be here with us. For listeners out there, if you'd like to learn more, forprop1.com is the website, and there's some great information there, explainers and more. If you'd like to know more about life cycle zoning, about the state's mandate on cities that they come up with this plan, I've linked to some of those sites and explanations on our Facebook page as well. And Jeff, again, thank you for being here and taking some time to explain this. And we joked sometime in the future we're going to have you back, and we're just going to talk all of this broadly. You've been doing this a while, right?
Been doing this a while.
What got you into this, just out of curiosity? How did you end up down this road?
My dad was an accountant, and I knew I didn't want to be an accountant, and so I went worked with my hands, and now I find myself sitting behind the desk 40, 50 hours a week. So I guess I'm right back to being an accountant.
Kind of. That's how it goes when you succeed.
We're super passionate about providing a need for the residents of Cache Valley at Visionary Homes, and it's why we come to work each day. And we know, I thought about this as I was coming in is with all of the struggles and challenges we have, there's nothing better than a homeowner that is truly happy when we hand over those keys and they say thank you.
That's the point of it all, right?
It's the point of it all. And we can deal with the challenges and the problems as long as we have those sweet rewards each time we hand over those keys.
Jeff, this has been a fun conversation. I hope we get a chance to do it again and talk broadly about all this because it's fascinating. 4prep1.com, the website. Dave Ramsey next here on KVNU Logan.